Hey, nobody watching the video, it is the Squid-Boy back at it with something you maybe care about this time, who knows? Anyways, I recently just saw the new Batman movie, The Batman, very original and creative title, and will never be annoying to try to reference in all the other Batman movies. It'll be incredibly easy to distinguish between them. Anyways, I just wanted to give my, brief thoughts on the movie. Well, I guess it's more potentially brief. I kind of just put the microphone in front of me, and I start talking. And however long I talk is however long the video is. So that's that. So before I talk about the movie, I want to talk about the trailers that released real quick. Because, you see, I remember when the first trailer came out, and it was like this really slow, sad, kind of scary trailer with the heavy emphasis on detective work. And they had the Nirvana Fish song playing in the background that just, made it really spooky and scary. And that trailer looked awesome, and it's probably the main reason I wanted to see the movie. Now, they released another trailer later, and I think this is the one I'm using for B-roll right now. But so anyways, in this trailer, they're more like, hey, look how cool Batman is. He's punching people. Isn't that awesome? Whoa, look, his car is really cool. And in that trailer, it kind of worried me because I'm like, this could either be a really dark and serious, melancholy, detective-based movie, which is kind of what Batman's all about, really. And it hasn't, we haven't had a real detective-based Batman movie yet. And so that would be really awesome to see. Or, conversely, it could just be a, generic kind of safe superhero movie. And, I didn't really have a interest in seeing Batman, again, if it was just gonna be that. Luckily for me, however, it was not that. Well, mostly, it was primarily the first thing with a sprinkling of the second thing in there from time to time. It was primarily the dark, brooding thing. And I'll say the movie's at its best when it is a dark detective thriller. It's kind of at its worst / most generic when it's just being a normal superhero movie. It's never bad or anything like that. It's just kind of I've seen this movie before, One thing that really helps the detective focus of this latest movie is that the main villain is the Riddler, which is almost like cheating for anyone writing a Batman detective story, because instead of Batman being looking into forensics and analyzing the clues, he just has to answer what's green and has flies. And speaking of the Riddler, I think that this is probably the scariest and probably one of the best Batman villains we've had in a movie so far. Primarily just because of how realistic he is. Not realistic in the sense where it's someone's actually gonna commit a bunch of mass murder and be haha, however, what has hands but no arms? A face but no eyes. Figure it out to catch me, haha. But more realistic in the sense where you see the guy and you hear him talk and stuff, and you're yeah, this guy, he would probably commit some terrorism in real life. And to speak of it, this was probably also the most realistic version of Batman we've had so far, which granted is not that high of a bar to cross, nor was it a bar many people were screaming for them to cross, but they did cross that bar. And it also made it so way more realistic that Batman could keep his identity, mainly just because instead of having a tank and an attack helicopter, he just has a car, which is a lot more difficult to trace back to. And so kind of speaking of Batman being more realistic in this movie, there's something I kind of have to talk about just out of obligation, and that's the whole Robert Pattinson bodybuilding controversy. this is what he looks like in the movie, and this is, like, pretty, like, high-end level physique, and it's also, if you go into, like, MMA and stuff, what most MMA fighters look like, but I guess a bunch of people through pop culture osmosis think the best fighters look like bodybuilders. They do not. This is just a complete fabrication. I have to mention this because when he got cast for the role, Robert Pattinson went on record saying that he wouldn't do like as strict like bodybuilding regimens as many of the actors who play like Marvel superheroes like Chris Hemsworth, and a lot of people were really angry about this. However, in the actual movie, he looks just fine. He looks like great, as I mentioned earlier, and what most people essentially gather from this was him being like, so allegedly, Warner, don't come after me. Allegedly, what he was saying was, I'm not going to do performance-enhancing drugs to increase my body mass, but Warner won't let me say that, so I have to say strict workout regimen. I should probably talk about the characters now, because in my opinion, characters, more than anything else, are what can make or break a movie, because even if your movie has just the coolest plot, if your characters are terrible, the movie is terrible. If your movie has the worst plot ever, but the characters are good, or even if one character is good, then you have the movie Venom, which is not a good movie, but also a movie that I will watch. So that really shows you like how important characters are in movies. Batman's characterization to start off is great. I really liked it. A lot of people say that Batman doesn't act like Bruce Wayne when he's Bruce Wayne, because, you know, even though they're the same character, Bruce Wayne acts a lot differently than Batman. And I think that's intentional. This Batman seems like he's only in his like 20s or so, and so he's doesn't have everything like all down yet. So he's still like Batman mostly, either because he hasn't moved on as much as the older Batman, or just because he hasn't figured out how useful his Bruce Wayne identity is. Jim Gordon does a great job in this. You know, he perfectly plays, as usual, the only non-corrupt major figure in Gotham City. I really liked the Penguin because instead of being some weird goblin man with an umbrella who is unexplainably British for some reason, he's just kind of a mafia type guy, and I like him. He has a lot of swagger and is also the only character who seems to be unafraid completely of Batman, and that really gives him a lot of personality. I also actually really liked Andy Serkis's version of Alfred in this movie. Although he is definitely not the usual portrayal of Alfred, one thing I noticed is from a line in the movie, it's heavily implied that Batman's like mentor, or at least earliest mentor, is Alfred, and that Alfred kind of doubles as a bodyguard, which I think like adds a lot to the character, because I'm pretty sure like in the comics he is at some point a secret agent in the past. However, I feel like that's mainly just because they're like, hey, people like Alfred, so let's make a comic series about him. We're gonna make a comic series about Alfred. Just invent some wacky garbage he did in the past, guys. It'll work perfectly. And then they did. But you know, Alfred, as usual, continues to be the best character in any Batman media ever. I also felt that Catwoman was pretty good in this movie. I've only ever been lukewarm on Catwoman as a character just because I've never been a big fan of the whole like hero dates like you know, a semi-villain who repeatedly takes advantage of their naivety or whatever. But I feel like she did a good job in this movie. However, I will say one thing. Okay, so they never call her Catwoman in this movie, which is fine. I don't care. That's whatever. But so like she doesn't have like the cat ears either. So like that's just like a mask, and you know, there's nubs where it's sewed together and stuff. But then Like, at some point in the movie, she's talking to Batman, and she's like, we could be the cat and the bat. It was never established you were Catwoman. You're just knowing the audience will assume that. That's such a continuity error, it annoys me. And so, yeah, those are, like, my main thoughts regarding this movie. However, I will, like, talk a bit more, you see, just about the soundtrack. The soundtrack was pretty good. However, there seemed to only be 2 songs in the entire movie. There's the Batman theme and the Nirvana Fish song. And they get a lot of mileage out of those 2, let me tell you. They just play and play and play that over and over. I actually did kind of want to talk about something else in this video, but looking out at how long this video is becoming and how unfocused it seems to be, I'd rather just do that in a later video, just because this one's getting to be like a bit out of control. My rambling thoughts rambled a bit too far this time. Yeah, so anyways, see ya. This is the end card, the video is over, but you can still stay around if you want. I don't know why you would, that is stupid, da 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 da. I don't know what else to sing about. Subscribe, 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 subscribe.